Greetings and salutations to all you folks out there. I'm going to be casting a game today. It is a Seton's, and I will not say that this game is the most epic game that's ever happened. It may not even be a great game, but I get a ton of questions on a regular basis about what to do in specific situations, and I always tell those people, go look at a replay for a higher rated player and copy what they do. So today we're going to be looking at a reasonably high rank Seton's. I would say it's an average Joe's, but there's a couple 1700, 1900 players in here. Lowest rank is 1100, and we're just going to kind of see how they handle the game, what they do, how they react, that kind of thing, and talk about it a little bit. So let me introduce the teams. I've got it slowed way down here so that the game does not run away from me, because some of the stuff that's happening is super early in this game. On the north side, we have Arnd. He is Seraphim in the air slot. We've got Zhang Yu, who I think I should know who it is, but that is a BC clan member, 1900 rated. We've got SWAT on the front with Aeon. We've got K2SO. He is Cybern in the beach slot. Then on the south side, we have Smurf Hunter, UEF in the rock. We've got Andy Rue on front as Seraphim. Hildegard, he is Cybern on the beach. That is a mirrored beach if I've ever seen one. And then Crispy Ambulance, Aeon in the air slot. Actually, I say that and then I realize that Hildegard is 1700 versus SWAT's or K2SO's 1400, but K2SO is a pretty good Seton's player. All right. So one of the first questions that I get in a Seton's game from the beach slot is, how the hell do I get all the way across the water and get this island away from the rock player? Because a quick little Seton's fact for you, if you are on the rock slot, you by default have 13 mexes on your landmass. These two belong to the rock player, not to the air player. That one is airs. And then if you get the island, that is 5 additionals for 18 mass extractors. Beach gets 12. So right off the bat, you are at a 1 mex disadvantage on your home territory, and then the island falls closer to the rock. K2SO is going to answer that question for you. You can see he has got an air factory going down first, followed by a mex and a power generator. We'll come back and see what his build is in just a second. He does have an engineer coming out of the factory first. SWAT walking to the front after a land factory is built, same as Andy Rue. That is definitely standard protocol. You need to get to the middle. There is approximately 12,000 mass, give or take a little bit, a little additional. We might actually ping both the front players and check their reclaim income once all of this is done. Andy Rue is going to bring a spare engineer up to the front to help him with reclaim, and it looks like SWAT is not. So right off the bat, he is going to have a little bit of a reclaim advantage. Up here, K2SO, he's got 2 engineers out of the factory, assisting more engineers building. He's going to go grab the hydro, and he built 3 mass extractors. Now, these guys usually run very, very highly tuned builds. So if he's leaving a mass extractor, there is definitely a reason for it. Right over here, you can see we've got an engineer coming in for some reclaim. That is going to boost up his power. Remember, the tree clumps are 100 power, 10 mass reclaim per clump, and those can boost you up to great soaring heights early in the game when you need that extra income for your transport to come out early. Zhang Yu, he is also going out to get some manual reclaim. He is getting an air factory down after a total of 369 P-gens, and he does not currently have plans for the hydro going down there, yada yada yada. You can see all of the reclaim orders around here. Talk about that in just a minute. And then we've got air factory first for Smurf Hunter, which is very weird. He's building a land factory before he builds the transport. I would have swapped these because of the slightly slower roll-off time of the UEF factory. I guess it's not that huge of a deal. Bam! K2SO, 4 engineers on a transport at 2 minutes and 20 seconds off of 2 power generators. Let me go grab his outlook here. He is definitely negatory on power, but you don't need to be worried about that when you do have a little bit of storage. So that reclaim, the power generator before the mex here, and building the hydro early, we've got a transport out almost at 2 minutes. It's loaded and launched at 2:20, and that is ridiculously early. So he is on his merry way to the island, and SWAT is currently not even thinking about a transport. He has got a transport not even in queue. That, friends, is how you do it. 3 minutes, we got a transport clearing for Zhang Yu headed over to the island. And do remember, though, that even though he is slightly slower, he is closer. So his transport would be arriving at the rock over here, if you mirrored it, about the same time as Beach's. So it is possible to get to the island very early in the game. We've got engineer drop off at 3:27. He's going to build a factory before this is even scouted. And I know that Smurf Hunter's build is very suboptimal, but I just wanted to show that there is a build to get a transport over there at around the 3-minute mark. SWAT and Andy Rue happily reclaiming in the middle. There is a Tham that got up around the outside edge. SWAT building a T1 point defense to try to head that off. If I were him, I would be building a tank, and of course he is. Because the only hope you have with this is if the tank randomly runs into the point defense, which it appears is going to happen. Is the PD going to finish? Maybe. And there it is. It's not really going to do much good, though. Not even going to fire a single shot. Tank's going to finish that one off. He could have gotten away without wasting the mass. That is a T1 bomber from the rock slot, hammering the front position. This is a beautiful, beautiful thing to behold. When you have a team player coming in, sending a bomber to harass the front and help out his own front. Play like a team, folks. You don't have to only be so narrow-minded as to put your blinders on and only look at what's happening in your slot. Believe it or not, the slot next to you can actually affect how your game is going. Let's check in with the air players. Our end, he is upping his T2 mexes as rapidly as he possibly can, assisting with 5 engineers and his ACU on singular T2 mex upgrades instead of upgrading a whole bunch at once. Of course, we all know that the reason for that is labs going into the back end. No, not really. The reason for that is that if you start 4 simultaneous upgrades and don't finish any of them, they all go to 90%, and then your mass overflow stops. You're stuck with 4 90% upgraded mexes instead of 3 complete ones and 1 60%. Makes sense, right? You got a higher mass income sooner. Those labs are going to buzz about the outside edge here and try to zap off some engineers. Going to be successful to a certain degree, but the greater degree of success here is the fact that they're breaking up all the tree clumps. That's going to make all of the reclaims slower in the back end. It's going to screw with the other air player. Things are not going to go well for them. It is an extreme annoyance if you can ram a scout or whatever the case may be up into the back end and just trample some of those tree clumps. Might even be one of those pesky little moles if you got a cyber and front player. Turn on that cloak, can't even see the dang thing, run it up in there and break all the tree clumps. Just run off into the sunset snickering to your heart's content. All right, so at the moment, Crispy Ambulance is on top by a fairly decent little margin. We've got Hildegard in second place and then Zhang Yu. All right, we'll have to see how this develops. SWAT is trying to get into the water, and let's take a look very quickly at Eco all around and then bug the front players for a reclaim total. Smurf Hunter is rocking 43 income at the moment as opposed to K2SO with 43. That is identical, and that is because we got a few T2 max upgrades over here and not quite so many on this side. However, we do have more mass extractors over here, and things are not looking bad. RN saying we got no mass. Oh my, that is because mass storage is front. Why you do this? SWAT, you play wrong. Let's go pick up SWAT. He got a total of 6,500 reclaim, and then Andy Rue clocked in with 7,000. So about 1,350 or so reclaim, but some of that probably came from things around his base. He's already reclaiming some tree clumps and that kind of thing. So yeah, about 13,000, maybe a little more than the 12,000 I was anticipating. So the reason mass storages are bad is that when you're the front player, you are going to overflow some mass. Your team is expecting to. They're overbuilding power. They're upgrading extra mass extractors. If you do not overflow that mass, you screw their build orders. One of the advantages to Setons and one of the disadvantages to Setons, depending on whether you're used to it or not, is that it is a highly refined metagame. So Setons has been overplayed to the point where everyone kind of expects the game to go a certain way. There is a refinement of the strategies that are available to you. I'll not determine whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is something that you can expect. Therefore, if you have someone who comes in and throws a wrench in the works, like SWAT, building mass storages and not overflowing as much, you just totally screw over your whole team. This is why people get angry with you if you jump into a Seton's game and don't do what people expect. It's not just because you're being a noob and not doing the right thing, it's because you're also screwing everyone else over. I like the frigate rush. Frigate rush is a good idea. It's over here before there is a frigate out here, but there is a little bit of a pathfinding issue with that frigate and the sonar, and then I think that frigate is going to get built. There is one out, and it is returning to help out. Its comrade in the docks is going to try to take on that Aeon frigate. There are a couple more headed over, though. Trident class has more health and more damage than the Aeon one does, plus it has an anti-air gun. Aeon has just, without a shadow of a doubt, the worst frigate in the game. That is just the way it is, so you just got to deal with that if you pick the faction. This is interesting over here. Zhang Yu is building loads of engineers off of his island, and he has decided to build his one and only naval factory off the island. You don't have to do things typically. You don't necessarily have to build off the beach or off here or wherever you want, but it is a little weird not to have extra build power going down somewhere else. Although you can assist with that, as I'm sure we will probably end up seeing later in the game. 2 versus 2, about the same health totals. Looks like they're going to just break off, disengage, and call it quits. Although with a little bit of extra build power on here, yes, there they are. They're coming to assist the factory. With a little extra build power over there, he could easily outmatch the production here, force beach out of the water, and then that would be very, very, very bad. SWAT throwing down wall sections. That is kind of an interesting choice. He's behind on units by a fairly significant margin, and he's trying to screw up the pathfinding for his incoming opponent. He's lost his radar, trying to back up. He's going to have to set up some form of defense later on because Andy Rue is pushing him quite hard. What did you do with all of the mass, SWAT? You've only got 42 income versus 64. No upgrades going on. You got a T2 land factory. That might be where the mass went. I'm not sure. But White also has a T2, so that is not necessarily going to be an advantage. Cerberus turret going down, trying to protect the factories from the frigates incoming. That ACU could very well get the torp upgrade. Also, it would accomplish basically the same thing, but actually be better, because you could walk out in the waterways and do area denial over a huge range. Let's take a look at that. That green range is the torpedo range. You can see that as opposed to the Cerberus range. It is actually bigger, and you can walk it out into the water. About 200 DPS on that thing, 10,000 health on your commander. It can, or 12,000 rather. Since it is a T2, it can effectively take on 2 destroyers with the help of a frigate or 2. So that is a good way to deny a naval push. That is a lot of scouts. That is a lot of mass being burned out to the outside edge, but I guess Andy Rue is helping his team out by keeping some continuous scouting. So on this side, K2SO 55 income, Smurf Hunter at 67. It looks like K2SO has been forced into building a lot of extra stuff to defend the island and has not actually come out ahead on his build. And we do have a T2 naval factory going down for Smurf Hunter, which is the appropriate reaction. You build enough frigates to not lose Navy, because usually when this happens, there is also a frigate rush happening over here, which will come in and try to deny your naval factories. You lose the island, you lose naval control, and you're screwed. But SWAT has prevented that from happening, in part because K2SO is not taking advantage of it. Now he's going to have a cruiser. He can wipe out the island pretty easily, and that is how you recover the island. The reason I say he's been wasting mass, all these torpedo defenses are stupidly expensive. You grab one of these things, they cost 450 mass a piece. Compare that to a T2 mass extractor. That is 2.5 T2 mass extractor upgrades sitting in the water, which would bring him more in line with what his opponent's eco is at. You will notice that Smurf Hunter has not had to build any torpedo defenses. Funny how that works out. So that is something to bear in mind. They are stupidly expensive, and just a couple of frigates can destroy them quite easily, so they are not that great of an investment. That is 6 frigates versus 10 and a destroyer. So not a good matchup there, with another destroyer on the way out. Or is that a cruiser? That is most definitely not a cruiser. That is a destroyer, I would think. Yes, Valiant. All right, so this is about to get wrecked, and we're going to have to see if he can rebuild over here. He definitely has plenty of build power, plenty of engineers. We'll just have to see how it goes. That, my friends, is a strat bomber being rushed because air has been lost. Arend was slow getting to ASF. Crispy Ambulance was able to just pound down the center with a group of ASF, airlock that factory, and that, as they say, is the end of that. Thankfully, there is a T3 engineer out. It is building a SAM. It is getting things prepped. Power generators have gone to Xiang Yu, who is probably getting the resource allocation upgrade at some point. Nope, he's building his own power because he has lost some right there. Where did the strat bomber go? It is right over that away. Just killed off all of that over there. Now it's going to go after not only T2 mexes, but you got to pick T2 mexes that have good amounts of engineers around them. You want to get the most kills possible with each bomb. Those were not quite close enough. That's already got 19 freaking kills on it. Cool beans. So T1 anti-air. Why T1 anti-air? That would be because T1 anti-air is extremely good and has extremely high DPS for hitting single targets that are flying over fast. Flak, not particularly great at hitting single targets. It is, after all, an AoE weapon, and it has a very, very slow projectile speed. So if you have a swarm of strat bombers, Flak is absolutely awesome. It will probably fire at the first strat bomber, miss it, and then hit the other 23 that are coming behind it. Flak can be quite good in those situations, and it is definitely better versus swarms of gunships. If you're going after a single target removal, you want to have T1 or T3. That is your direct fire DPS. Of course, SAM's faster projectile speed, longer range, heavy hitter. T1 AA, since it is a T1, it has the highest DPS per mass of any of the 3 tiers of defenses. That is typically how it goes. As you go up the tiers, you drop some DPS per mass in favor of some HP per mass and some range. The net is always a little bit less, but the concentration of mass that you're able to fit into an area makes up for it. That was a little bit of a ramble, which probably doesn't hold a whole lot of meaning for some people. Hopefully that will come up at some point. Or if you've listened to other casts of mine, I've talked about it before. Strat bomber coming in for the island. That is going to wipe out some of these lonely, lonely, poor, helpless, defenseless T2 mass extractors. Oh, it hurts your soul. This is where you're getting very, very angry with your air player. Xiang Yu complaining he just had Navy 1. Look at this build power flooding the water. Finally finished the economy upgrades. Even has a T3 mass extractor, and he is now diving into the water with gusto. We've got 3 destroyers, 2 frigates versus 2 destroyers and 5 frigates. Another destroyer over here and more frigates pouring out of the factory. That is definitely a bad, bad thing to have happen to your Navy. Now we've got the single factory there and a support factory over here with not anywhere near enough build power. SWAT wants help. Well, bud, you gotta... Oh, he's offering help. Well, okay, that is a whole different story. He'll make a Tempest? Well, that should prove interesting. North Sea will be crushed before then. Yeah, you're not looking to be in too great of a spot. Smurf Hunter rocking 111 income. K2SO only 88. He's lost the island. He's going to lose all this reclaim. And now he is going to end up with the raw end of the deal. Things looked fantastic for the Northside team when this game started. Had the Navy on this side owned, the island on this side owned, front was doing okay. It all looked pretty good, and then that air loss. Ouch. And I think what we're seeing overall, like as a grand theme on this, is that the south side was balancing their attack approach with an economy boost. So you got the T3 mechs, you've got eco upgrades still going down. Hildegard, 159 mass income to Xiang Yu's 130. Now granted, the Strat Bomber did do some of that damage because it removed some T2 mexes, but most of that has been built. It just slowed down the progress. And the difference there is that with the superior number of mass extractors, Xiang Yu will eventually pass the South Beach. That was a bad air loss there. Arend got in a little bit of a bad tangle. ASF slightly out of place, bad turn, and now air wholly belongs to the south side. Smurf Hunter trucking around right there, not sure what he's up to. 2, 3 mass extractor upgrades completed, and rocking on with the rest of them. you're wondering why all of these are paused, some people actually have a UI mod that automatically upgrades the mass extractor when you build it and pauses it the next game tick, so that you just have to unpause it to upgrade, which, you know, you can debate all you want about whether that's fair or not, whether it's cheating to have a UI mod that does that, but I'm just explaining why, as you saw in the beginning of the game, instantly built T1 mass extractors just are paused. That's why that is. But you can accomplish the same thing, build all your T1 mass extractors, double click them all, upgrade as soon as you see your economy dip, pause them, and then you can just go around and assist them with engineers. It's like an automatic upgrade queue. You can just set it and forget it. And no, it is not cheating. Your mexes still make income at the same rate that they always did, even when they're paused. Pausing is not the same thing as turning off production for an economy building. And it just makes it a whole lot easier. Makes it a whole lot easier. We got 4 destroyers, cruiser, and 1 frigate. Frigates are not as big of a deal in the Aeon Navy, but you still do need them as a little bit of a meat shield. Another cruiser up there defending against strat bombers, just waiting for the air to come their way. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 destroyers versus 5 destroyers, which is actually a decent standoff. But here comes the sonar to cloak those up, and that will make life much more difficult for Zhang Yu. Interesting point of fact, cruiser has a bigger vision radius than the attack range of a destroyer. Therefore, if you have cruisers mixed in with your destroyers, you can usually negate the effect of stealth because you will be able to see them before they can come in range, which is pretty dang cool. But then again, that's less destroyers mixed into your navy, so you gotta kind of decide whether or not that is worth it. Looks like Andy Rue is getting into the water. Instant T2 upgrade on that factory, and he is going to be assisting in the downfall of the North Navy. Something to remember about Exodus classes. If you compare the stats on these, they have a 180-ish DPS on the torpedoes, 75 of which cannot be shot down by torpedo defense because it is a depth charge. And they have 205 DPS, I forget exactly what it is, on the main cannon, which is greater torpedo damage and slightly less main gun damage than the Salem. Salem has 6,050 HP versus 7,500 HP on the Exodus. Now, why would the Exodus be so much better, you may ask? Well, it's actually not. No AA, so T1 bombers, T2 gunships can occasionally be shot down by a group of Salems. You don't necessarily have to have the support, whereas on the Aeon side you do. And then the Salems have a good fire rate. It's hard to dodge 100% of the shots from a Salem. The Exodus class, on the other hand, only fires once every, 4 seconds or so? So it is very easy to dodge 100% of the shots if you're paying attention. So a microed Cyber Navy will often win versus an equal mass Aeon Navy. However, once the numbers get really ramped up, we're talking like 10 plus destroyers on each side, Aeon starts not being at quite such a disadvantage, and the total health pool being bigger starts to matter more, and you know, it just gets harder to individually micro. So once you get up into bigger numbers, I would actually take the Aeon destroyer over the Cyber. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm an Aeon hippie at heart and I just hate Cybers, but that would be a very unpopular position, I feel. The T2 Naval HQ was lost right there, which means the destroyers cannot be produced, and that is going to be doom for Zhang Yu. That is exactly what you don't want to have happening. That was TAC missiles launched at the Tempest, and that kind of sucks. He has almost got that thing built if he could just get it a little further, but the TAC missiles keep threatening to kill it. Now we've got a TMD up. That should work out pretty dang well. And TAC missiles coming in will be deflected. There they all go. Whee! Over to the side. Tempest, you just gotta finish, and then you can kill all of this crap with very little effort. That needs to be... Yep, there we go. T2 upgrading again so the destroyers can come back on the field. Looks like we got a retreat over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7... versus, what do we got over here? We've got 11, so 7 on the front. So this is actually a slightly superior group to that, but it is close to the build power. Probably a case of Hildegard not wanting to drop a bunch of reclaim over here right before a Tempest comes online. And that Tempest is going to skedaddle out of here as those destroyers keep harassing it. The Tempest can one-shot kill the destroyers if it can hit it. But hitting it is the problem. And the torpedoes are quite good on it, though. I think somewhere north of 300, 375, something like that. I may totally be remembering that wrong. But the torpedoes are quite good. So even if it can't hit with the main gun, it's still doing a lot of damage with those torps. There they go. You can see just peeling the health away from that destroyer. Also insanely good anti-torpedo as a point of fact. So T1 bombers coming in. Excellent choice versus a slow-moving gigantic hitbox. They do a lot of DPS for the mass that they cost. You're going to throw them away. One-shot wonder. That is going to submerge. All right. So, submerging to get away from the air, and actually probably better that it's submerged anyway, because the majority of the DPS of this naval group is going to be on the surface. But the ground fire is real. Ground firing with the destroyers, trying to lay in as much extra DPS as possible. Now microwing to get away. Looks like Xiang Yu is going to come in and attempt to push that Navy off the Tempest. But I think that is going to be at the cost of his own Navy, because the quantity of Cybern frigates in this area is utterly horrifying. Frigates are bad for Aeon Navy because they are cheap single targets for the guns to waste DPS on, while the more important destroyers are in the back just hammering in the hits on the Navy. Ugh, this is not going to go well for Xiang Yu, and there's also Seraphim destroyers to worry about. That is a T3 upgrade going down. Probably going to start rocking out the battleships. Lay in even longer range DPS to deal with any other potential Tempest. Oh, Xiang Yu has got another Tempest half build. He is pausing. Probably a power problem, since he is also building a T3 power generator right there. And that's a chicken. I'm focusing so much on the Navy. Totally missed a chicken being built in the back end here. Actually, probably on the front. Andy Rue right there. And I think that is probably going to be the end of it. SWAT was running away from the torpedo damage on this Navy, and now he's got to kind of just sit in the water, wait for the chicken to go by, and there's nothing in his base that can stop the chicken. So that is going to be a problem. Andy Rue calling someone a noob. Get SWAT, get his comm, you're a noob. If that is what it's directed at, I would kind of agree, because the front player's ACU is not a primary target. That's just giving his economy to another player. SWAT venturing a little further into the water, oddly enough. And Tempest getting run to the back. Very shortly, he is going to run out of space. That is it. He is going to have to die now. Such a shame, such a shame. Chicken coming in. We've got a fairly decent bit of Navy on the north side. This has just been totally stagnant. But there are two Neptune classes, which by themselves, with a handful of shield boats, could probably wreck all of that. So I think North Navy is effectively lost. South Navy is literally lost. Xiang Yu taking fire on his own shore. He is going to get wrecked. Chicken coming up. The neck, that is going to destroy front and then move on into the north side. Arend, while he does have a decent number of ASF, I think is vastly inferior to the numbers. We got 90. The south side, the numbers of the south side are 112. So not as bad as I thought, but as we've seen a couple of times already, Arend does not seem to be making especially good turns today. I've not played with Arend in a while, so I'm not sure how his air game is overall recently. It used to not be his favorite slot, and maybe that is still the case. He just got dumped into it by the random selection. All right, Xiang Yu, dodging like a mofo. You got to do that to survive. Salem's. That comment I made earlier about not really being able to dodge 100% of Salem shots, yeah, that's mostly in respect to the very extremely large hitboxes that Navy has. With an ACU or something, you can dodge, oh, I would say a good 90% of them if you're careful. Rallying one more time to attempt a kill here, but I don't think it is going to do much good. Yathatha moving to the north, going to wipe out K2SO. As if that needed to happen. And guys, I think that is game. So, why, you ask, would I show a game like this? I said it at the beginning. You watch it, you learn from it, you copy the good things, and you try not to do the bad things. And I think this is a good example of an extremely excellent learning game. RN commenting, accidentally gave air. I don't think you accidentally gave air, and I don't think you gave air. You were behind in eco, but you had similar-ish numbers. Throw a couple SAMs in there, a couple of cruisers. You could have won it. But yeah, it definitely was not a great situation. So, some things to pull from the game. Number one, if you're in the beach slot, go for that island. Number two, you got to eco as you're doing the rest of your things. If you only build torpedo defenses, which cost an extraordinary amount of mass in return for not so great a DPS, and they're easily killed by frigates, then you're behind on eco upgrades, they're ahead on Navy, and you lose. And then you don't want to lose air because strat bombers. And then you don't want to disrupt the meta in a bad way. Disrupting the meta in a good way is awesome. You send some extra bombers, you do some drops, you try some different strategies, you do some things to disrupt the other team's gameplay and force them off balance. What you don't want to do is, without notifying your team, disrupt the existing meta for team play, like building mass storages and screwing over your teammates' builds because you didn't give them as much mass as they thought they were going to get. Hopefully this answers some questions that people had about Seton's gameplay in particular. I am by no means an expert. I'm looking forward to seeing what people say in the comments, because there are some people that float around watching this channel that are extremely good at the game, much higher than my measly 1200 rank, which would barely even get me into this game, and they're probably going to understand it on a much deeper level. But hopefully the surface evaluation is a good one. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the first cast in quite a long time. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.